it's my pleasure to welcome you on the behalf of the Polish community.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're approaching the epilogue of the Legacy of the Bretons season. And the story this year was a bit different, like more grassroots, the Elder Scrolls. You mentioned that quite a few times.
Yep.
But do you have your favorite moment or quest in this storyline?
I do. There's lots of really cool moments in the overall storyline. If you're asking me to pick a favorite one, it's probably not in the main story. It's actually in one of the objectives in High Isle towards Rayoc, which is the storyline of Ember. Gets you the Ember or Ember the companion. I just love the vibe, the feel. She's just an amazing character, and I think the combination of the world building and the fiction and just what you're doing with Ember just are almost magical. Like, it turned out really, really well. So that's probably my favorite story in the chapter.
She seems like your favorite companion of all.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome. Yeah.
And not the only one thing that was called awesome by the community. I mean, community is pretty unanimous that new dungeons, the ones from the Lost Steps, are really good. Actually, they got really a lot of positive comments. Also comparing to previous dungeon DLCs. Players praise interesting boss fights, great visuals. So do you have any cool stories or maybe something to share about the development? How did you came with ideas to create such dungeons?
Yeah, I mean, there's always all kinds of interesting tidbits when you're making things, and some of the pitches, were pretty out there, but I don't know if a lot of people know that Graven Deep was actually inspired by a house we built. It was a few years ago now, I think. And the team just loved the, kind of the underwater feel and vibe. So they were like, how do we turn this into a dungeon? And they started kind of going through and coming up with ideas. And then the team actually came to me and they were like, we want you to be in a bubble underwater. And I kind of flipped the table initially because I was like, no underwater combat. Like, we're totally not doing it. We can't do that. The engine can't do it. Like, just no. And they're like, well, how about this? And they were able to convince me that this was the right thing to do, and they did it, and it turned out awesome, and players love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the underwater bubble was one of the very things that was really loved by the players. It gave great impression, and it was a great additional stuff in a dungeon. Do you plan now to add more that kind of stuff in the future, or maybe use the underground bubble a bit more?
I mean, who knows where we'll go? I will definitely say that it's another tool in our toolkit to kind of play with now that we know that it works and we don't have to do anything crazy with it. We could see it again in the future, but it's definitely one of the things that the team is constantly striving towards is how do we surprise and delight? How do we do things that players aren't expecting? And so they're always working on ways to do that.
Yeah, players definitely love this one.
Mm-hmm.
And since this year's story has been a bit different than previous ones, will the epilogue also be different in content, or maybe the way you tell the story, or some other way?
Well, I don't want to spoil anything. So what I will say is it definitely wraps up the year-end storyline. I particularly like the ending, and we'll just kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, no spoilers, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So, Firesong's story is developed around a faction that got much interest after High Isle's release, the Druids. So, maybe here you can also share some interesting facts or tidbits, spoilerless obviously, that ESO players might not be aware of. What about the Druids?
I think that one of the interesting things about kind of the Druids and the Druids on this island and whatnot is they have been around for a very, very, very long time. And they actually migrated from the mainland of Tamriel here because of their beliefs and whatnot. So you learn a lot more about that in the prologue for this update, and then you learn more as you're kind of going through the storyline in this Firesong DLC, just about the druids and who they are and why it's so kind of out there that they're essentially at war with each other.
So, looking at Firesong in general, from your perspective, what's the most exciting part of the epilogue?
Just the epilogue or the chapter in general?
Maybe both.
So I really like what the team has done in terms of, telling this kind of really interesting standalone story. It's got, druids, it's got the Mammer and as the pirates, and then how, the epilogue kind of weaves all of the events from the chapter into the DLC and kind of wraps up the storyline. I think there's lots of really, really cool stuff there. There's lots of interesting lore and history in it as well. So it's going to be something that players are going to get to dig into and really enjoy.
And on top of that, there will be also some beloved characters that will make a return. So we all know that Raz is finally making his way to Sisters Islands. So I need to ask this question. Do you have a favorite character in ESO, and why it is Razumdar?
Oh boy, why is it Razumdar? Actually, it's not.
Oh.
I do love Raz. I think Raz is a really, really, really cool character. But for me, the characters that I really love are the ones that aren't necessarily, quite as flashy or showboaty. I really like, I still really, really like Abner Tharn. He's one of my favorite characters. He's a bit of a jerk, but he's also, this, really interesting character. I love Lyris as well. Like, she's got a great story. And it'll probably be painful to folks because I always know people are like, when is Darian coming back? When is Darian this? What happened to Darian? Like, Darian's one of my favorite characters too. He's just got this really cool storyline as well. So, yeah, there's lots of characters in ESO though. So,
yeah, it's hard to
lots
pick
of
one.
choices.
Except for Raz, obviously. So, there are many stories, many dramas, many conspiracies, many events that happen across Tamriel all the time. So, I mean, sometimes it's hard to imagine that anyone would live a peaceful life there, like peaceful and uneventful, just typical everyday life. Have you ever thought about it, how it would be to actually live in Tamriel?
Yeah, that's one of the things we kind of think about all the time. And I think that's one of the things that kind of helps the world feel a little bit more believable than some other games. In terms of all of the characters that we create live in the world. And, we think about, what does the average person in here do? That's why magic isn't as kind of prevalent where everybody doesn't use magic. We really kind of focused in on the way the player is special is because they are the ones that can do things that normal people can't. But you're right. There's lots of strife. There's lots of stuff going on around in the world. But the individual kind of character in the world outside of the player isn't really privy to a lot of that stuff. They don't really know kind of what's going on. They kind of go along about their own life and do their own things. And their one particular part of the world or their bubble that they're in, yeah, there could be some bad things going on in there, but they don't get the grand sense of, Daedric invasions or, potentially dragons invading their homeland and things like that. They're more focused on kind of what's front and center to them.
So do you ever think of who would you like to be in the world of Tamriel? A hero or a regular, I don't know, craftsman maybe, or a fisherman? How do you advise yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody wants to be the hero in some way, shape, or form. That's kind of why we play games, is to kind of role play individual characters, do something that you don't normally get to do in real life. So I think, being that hero is probably one of those things that I tend to lean more towards when I play games. Sometimes I get in moods and I want to play the jerk. But for the most part, it's the how do I help people? How do I save people? How do I be the hero, for sure?
So, about saving people, we are approaching to the end of the Legacy of the Bretons storyline season. Can you maybe give a bit of a sneak peek of what's next to ESO? Where will we go next?
I shouldn't. I want to because I'm so excited about what we're doing, but I think people are just going to have to be patient just a little bit longer. We're getting close. If you look at, previous history in terms of time frame of when we're going to start talking about the new stuff. So let us get this chapter and DLC kind of done and this year of stuff done and out there for players. And then we'll start talking about the new stuff. But it's going to be really cool. I'm really, really stoked. Really stoked. Like,
oh, yes. I'm looking forward to it too.
I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, we all keep fingers crossed for that. Last but not least, do you have any message for our Polish players that will be watching you and watching this interview?
Just honestly, like a huge thank you for the support. ESO has grown a ton over the years. Last year alone, we added almost 2 million new players, or just over 2 million new players. So we're growing, the community's growing, it's thriving. The game is played in over 200 countries now. And so it's amazing that there are so many people in so many different communities around the world that are playing ESO and supporting us. So just a huge thank you.
Thank you. And again, thanks for the interview and see you around in Tamriel.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.